Hey all, welcome to Otaku no Video, where I'm here to talk about Hayao Miyazaki. If you've ever wondered who he is, what he's done, or if you have any parents who have asked that question, send them here. So, who is Hayao Miyazaki? He was born during World War II. In fact, he says he remembers running through a field while an American bomber flew overhead. So he was a child of World War II in a lot of ways. When he grew up, his father worked a lot, and his mother was kind of sickly. She was in hospital a lot of the time, and so he spent a lot of time alone. If you've seen My Neighbor Totoro, and so this meant he was growing up when Osamu Tezuka was reinventing manga, and everyone was talking about that. And so Miyazaki also wanted to make his own manga, and so he did a lot of drawing. But then two things happened to change that. He went and he saw two movies. Miyazaki saw a Russian animated film called The Snow Queen and a Japanese animated film called Legend of the White Serpent. And this is considered the first Japanese anime film. I've talked about it here before. You can check out that video. And those changed his mind. Instead of being a manga artist, he now wanted to be an animator. So he then went and eventually got a job at a company called Toei Doga, which is now called Toei Animation. And they were the big animation company at the time. They'd actually made Legend of the White Serpent. And they basically churned out a lot of children's films, children's animated films. And he actually got a reputation there for being someone who would look at the stories and ask, is there any way we could make this a little less cheesy, a little more interesting, things like that. He basically rewrote the ending of one of the movies to be much more interesting. And while he was there, he made friends with a guy named Isao Takahata. So Miyazaki and Takahata were very chummy, and they wanted to make more impressive films. So they would challenge each other to say, okay, on this film, let's get really good at crowd scenes. Everything else we'll try to do well, but let's really focus on how to do really cool crowd scenes. So every movie they challenged themselves in some way. And it's got attention, they made a movie for Toei Doga at the time called Horus, Prince of the Sun, which has some elements of later Miyazaki movies. You have to get to track it down. And that got some attention within the anime community. This was the early 70s. And especially because then Miyazaki adapted a manga to anime, made an anime TV series called Lupin the Third. Yeah, him. And so there's a magazine called Animage, which was the big anime fan magazine at the time, and their editor Toshio Suzuki went down to try to interview Miyazaki, and Miyazaki wouldn't talk to him. He was too busy. Suzuki came up, and Miyazaki said, "I'm too busy, not now." And Suzuki basically sat there waiting for Miyazaki to get done for the entire day. And Miyazaki just kept on drawing and working and so forth and ignoring Suzuki the whole time. And this really fascinated Suzuki. He ended up taking a photo of the back of Miyazaki's head and printing that in his article about Miyazaki, saying this is a rare photograph of the back of Miyazaki's head. Anyway, Suzuki then came back the next day because he was so interested in this guy, and he started asking questions and so forth. And they have been talking every day since. Because partly, Suzuki started talking to Miyazaki about what Miyazaki wanted to do. And Miyazaki said, I've got this idea for this post-apocalyptic environmental story called Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind. And it's going to be a movie, but no one will give me funding. And Suzuki said, well, no wonder, there's no manga, there's no novel, you're just trying to start an anime movie out of nothing. It's not how it's done. There's got to be a manga first. Tell you what, let's do. You draw a manga adaptation of it, a manga version. I'll publish it in Animage, and assuming that's popular, that'll get, the interest and we can get the funding. And Miyazaki said, okay, fine. So he started drawing this, and that got them attention, that got them interest. They actually advertised for animators in Animage. And Miyazaki made Nausicaa, the Valley of Wind, which came out in 1984. This was a major film that year. A lot of significant anime films came out that year. The Macross movie, Do You Remember Love, came out that year. And Nausicaa was remarkable because it was serious. It was for adults. And in no way did it have, you know, blood and nudity and violence and so forth, that kind of stuff, although it did have some violence and such. But, I mean, this wasn't kids stuff at all. And there was stuff about, you know, environmental protection and apocalypse and caring for each other and the danger of rage and just, what? So that was remarkable. Also, a couple of years before, Miyazaki had made a Lupin the Third movie, The Castle of Cagliostro, which is still considered to be one of the greatest adventure films ever made. But it was still a Lupin the Third adventure. So, but Nausicaa was this original thing. Wow. And Miyazaki enjoyed that experience so much that he then went on to form a company with Isao Takahata and Toshio Suzuki. They all got together. They formed an animation studio called Studio Ghibli, using a lot of the staff from Nausicaa. And this was very unusual at the time, it should be pointed out. Over here, like in America, we have studios like Pixar and Disney and so forth. Over there in Japan, usually you'll have some animation studios, but typically production companies will come together to make an animated work, and they'll bring an animation studio to do it. And this was all in one. And so Miyazaki went on to do several movies. He made something called Panda Go Panda, which is a kid's film. And it was made because he wanted to go with his kids to see a movie, and there were no movies for kids out. And he's like, this isn't right. So he made his own kids movie, animated film, very light and fun, and it did quite well. And so he used that as a basis to go off, and he made a movie called My Neighbor Totoro, which also had the advantage that it was double billed with a film made by Isao Takahata, his friend, also by Studio Ghibli, called Grave of the Fireflies. If you've heard of that. And that was a big cultural thing. I mean, that movie was well known, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, the book was well known, it was based on. So Totoro got a lot of publicity as a result of that. And Totoro is this remarkable film. There's no plot. There's no conflict. There are no antagonists. There's no villains. And yet it's entrancing. So he made that, and that got a lot of attention. He made a movie called Castle in the Sky, La Puta, Castle in the Sky. And that did even better. And that was more of an action-adventure story. So it showed, okay, he can do those sorts of stories. Then he did a movie called, I think if I'm getting the chronology here right, Kiki's Delivery Service was the next thing. And this was the big one. This was the big movie that made them lots and lots of money, got lots of attention, lots of critical acclaim. This put Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki totally squarely on the big pop culture map. And so from there he moved on to a movie called, I'm getting this right again, Porco Rosso. I get a feeling I'm missing one. Anyway, Porco Rosso, which is about a World War I flying ace who's cursed to have the head of a pig. But lots of fun. And again, by this point he'd established this style that he tells stories that are very soothing, very... There may be antagonists, there may be bad guys, but it's very much about characters, the issues they're going through, there are obstacles going along, but it's not, you know, you're evil, I'm good. It's, we're both trying to get something. And you may be wrong, but we can understand why. So we told these very human stories. Also stories of an environmental message, usually, and stories that are just very, very moral. So he did Porco Rosso, and then he moved on to the movie I'm going to have to do in the next part of this video, Princess Mononoke.